Well, the beautiful thing about making movies is that it's always about emotion. That always comes first. And even though the facts are interesting, the facts are fascinating, and they're part of our history, none of it really comes together unless it's sewn together with characters and their emotional lives together. She's this crazy ball of contradictions. She's somebody who is very measured and can be very tough and very to the point and kind of brutal in her analysis, and yet she's incredibly warm, and you really feel that through all of these years of spending all of this time with Mohamedou, obviously, pleading his case and defending him and spending years and years and years really just sitting in his cell with him while, on the elliptical or watching television, that she really came to love him. And when you see them together, as I've been able to do this week while we've been shooting, it's such a special thing to see Mohamedou and Nancy together, this older woman who feels very maternal towards this guy, and you can just see the twinkle in both of their eyes. I think they really care about one another. Mohamedou and Mohamedou's story has a lot to teach us about humility, about humanity, I think, but also about forgiveness and about the human spirit. He's somebody who has lived a life that none of us could imagine, survived a cruelty that we could never imagine, ripped out of his home, abducted from his home, and taken to a prison, and many prisons, tortured, feeling like he probably would never leave there. And yet, he loves this world, he loves this life, has had to have a real understanding of his, the people that imprisoned him, and I think he says he has become a writer. In some ways, his path was open to him. What this experience, this terrible, terrifying experience, in some ways revealed to him who he really was. And he really is a writer, something that maybe he didn't know before. I think he thought he was, a technical guy who did computers. And here he is, a guy who ended up being a writer, and, not just about his journey, but also poetry, and also a kind of psychological path. I think that he's an amazing teacher about the human spirit. I just love how his mind works. I think he's really curious and inquisitive, and I've been really amazed by this shoot to see how the documentary spirit really works, that it really does work by instinct, that he really believes that the way that you approach making films is that you don't try to control it or shape it, that you spend your time noticing. You're in the space, you see the characters, and then you notice what's happening, and then you make sure that you capture that. I think that really works for this film. I think that it gives this film a really interesting tone. I think we really want to get it right. We want to be fair to all of the parties because, and I really believe in this, I think that the truest stories are the ones where there just aren't any bad guys, where it's just human beings that come together and they're trying to do the best that they can, but they're guided by fear. And I think if there is a lesson in this story, is that, that impulse, that fear impulse is so strong. And unfortunately, in the era of Guantanamo, in the era of 9/11, it took over the American psyche. We were making decisions, we were making international foreign policy decisions by fear, instead of using the laws and the rules that we knew, that we held dear to. The law is something that I'm really interested in, how it works and the intricacies of it, and how our country is shaped by that, how the world is shaped by that. If there was anything that made me believe in democracy and the rule of law, it's been making this film. I think this film really drives that home, that it's the most important thing that we have, and it's our humanity, really.
Considering the personal need he had for justice, the need an entire nation had for justice, that was an incredibly brave thing to stand true to. And meeting him in person, you know, he was talked about, I think, in the Washington Post as the colonel with a conscience, and he certainly does have that. So he was incredibly forthcoming when I met him and his wife, and he was amazingly helpful. I was trying to understand who he was before we meet him in the film, so I could inhabit him and then have him react in this drama to everything that unfolds for him. And he even gave me his the gold marine wings that his father, who was a dentist, had actually smelted out of gold for him, handmade, and said, you must wear these on the day. Which, to know that I had that blessing was incredibly important, and to be entrusted with that artifact alone was incredibly important. So yeah, I was really honoured to bring his story to the screen. Tahar is a very subtle actor, but he always has an imprint of charisma and personality in his characterizations. He's very cool and just very easy to spend time with, and there's a searing intelligence behind all of that, but it's never demonstrated. There's a lot of humor. I mean, it really did marry well with what comes off the page, and how Mohamedou had sounded when we talked to Mohamedou and himself. So it seemed like the obvious choice from the very beginning, to be honest. He has an economy of style in his performance, which I think is very, very useful for this, because you want to be very close to this character because of the confinement, because of the duress of what he endures. It goes on, and you also want to really, really feel for him. You want to like him, you want to be with him and root for him. At the end of the day, this is a celebration of the human spirit, this film. That's really what it's about. It's not specifically about a political stance or knocking at administration or a political point of view. It's about a human point of view of what we can endure, what we shouldn't have to endure, and how to take solace from that, and to realize the human spirit is a pretty extraordinarily robust entity. And Mohamedou is literally living proof of that. I mean, what can you say about Jodie? She's just so unbelievably lovely. She's whip smart, funny, easy to work with, helpful and collaborative, and yeah, of course, the fanboy in me's going, I'm going to see with Jodie Foster. I can't not have those moments. I've grown up watching her films, and directed films as well as acted, and yeah, I'm a huge, huge fan of her as an actress and a director, and to have the opportunity to work with someone like that is always a learning experience, and a joyful one at that, when they're that pleasant. Kim's got this uncanny knack of making the everyday and the known and the historical, the actual factual, very entertaining, and feeling like it's fresh, feeling like it's happening for the first time in front of you, even if it's a historical event that's well documented. And he's always searching out for the truth in the drama, in the scene, and I think that makes him a really good director. And he has quite a universal approach with that. He allows actors their space for process, however they get into a role or a scene, and he'll do a lot of rehearsal with someone, or with two people, or with the whole scene, or he'll just leave it alone, or he'll talk about something technically from his point of view that needs a little bit of help from the actors to limit the choices, but narrow it down to the frame that needs to work, or the camera movement. But it's never not creative. I mean, I think there was a moral imperative with this story that was a big draw. I think as an actor, it was very nice to play someone who's not a troubled genius, who is human and has flaws that are recognizable and is struggling with his own moral compass and sense of purpose and place within the story, and a really nice character arc to play, even though a supporting role. And it's nice for me to be able to play a supporting role, especially in something that I care so much about. I think primarily this is a story about joy and hope and salvation, and it takes in a very specific moment in our history where very difficult questions were being asked of us as what is the correct response? How should we deliver justice for a massive, atrocious act of terrorism? And what is it that defines us as opposed to that action? Ends that justify them. I mean, it's a political thriller. It's also a legal thriller. You've got incredible character studies of strong-minded people on both sides of those arguments. And at the center, the front and center, is this luminous human being, this extraordinary man who I hope the audience will be charmed, amused, and heartbroken by.
We spoke a lot about the project as a whole, and Terry's character in the film is an amalgamation of two different people, real-life characters. So although Teresa Duncan is named after an actual Teresa Duncan, the way that she's portrayed in the film is based on another woman as well. And just for cinematic reasons, they had to condense those two people into one character. And so a lot of it was Kevin and I sort of discussing a bit about how Terry it will be different in the movie than she was in real life, but that also, I think there's a very special dynamic between Nancy and Mohamedou, and Terry sort of acts as a little bit of relief, I think, to lighten some of the heavy fuse situations, because she is just kind of a light and a lovely person and a kind person, and that's what we wanted to infuse into the story. I think Jodie and I, what I really have come to respect and love about working with her is that she is just a professional. She thinks about everything. She's sort of meticulous when it comes to filmmaking. And I think because she is a director as well, she looks at stories, and perhaps she was this way before she was a director, but I noticed that her perspective on stories and her perspective on character and kind of the overall scope of a project is very unique and very rare. He just brings a certain sense of grounding to not only the story, but also to the set. He's super collaborative. He's always asking questions. One thing that I really respect about Kevin, and I've loved about working with him, is that he's really good at directing. He's really good at saying how he feels and saying, I don't know, that was too much, or that didn't feel right, or let's try it like this, or let's try it like that, let's do this. And I love working with directors who are vocal and who have a strong point of view, but who are also open to your point of view. And so it's been, I just feel like it's been a beautiful opportunity for me to learn from some of the greatest that we have out there. Between Jodie and Tahar and Kevin, I feel like a student on this movie, and it's just exciting. It's really exciting to sort of be a part of it and also witness everything unfolding before me and take lots of notes. Well, I got to meet the real Mohamedou over Skype initially. And I feel like before you even meet this man, if you read the book, if you watch the movie, if you read one article online, you feel the essence of his spirit so strong. And so before I even Skyped with him, I just knew how lovely he was, and I knew how special and how unique and radiant his spirit was, because you feel that. You feel that in the air that exists even around his name. And the first time I Skyped with him, and his big smile came up, and he said, "Thank you for doing this movie." And it moved me so deeply, because all I wanted to say to him was thank you for trusting us to breathe life into this in a cinematic way. His courage and his ability to forgive, his ability to love, his ability to truly be unconditional, and remain patient and calm in what would drive, I think, probably 99% of humanity to a place that's very different than the place that he's in emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. It takes a soul that's so strong, and whatever his life brings him for the rest of his life, he's here to move mountains, and he already is. The fact that he is able to be the man and show up as the man that he is today, he's changing the world. He is the man that I wish kids would study when they grow up in school. He is the man that I think people should research and read about and listen to, because the wisdom that pours out of his smile, the wisdom that pours out of his words, it's a wisdom that's a lost art in today's world. It's a wisdom that says everything that every single ancient, religious, biblical, or institutional text has ever said, which is just be kind to one another, love your neighbor, take care of one another, forgive, show up. He kind of strips back all of the distraction and chaos of consumerism and materialism and plants you right back down into the true seed of your soul. I'm so moved by how Tahar is choosing to bring Mohamedou's character to life. It's like watching live theater with him. He's so real, and he's so vulnerable, and he's so honest, take after take after take, and the amount of energy that he has to bring to every single moment, and the levels that, as a human being, we go from being really emotional to being extremely elated, or whatever the varying degrees are, and every single moment of that wave of emotion is portrayed through the way that he chooses to act.
Neil works for one of the intelligence agencies or branches within the U.S. government. And so therefore is a bit of a gatekeeper when it comes to certain information that Benedict needs in order to run a fair trial in prosecuting Mohamedou. And Neil kind of proves to be a little less than helpful in that regard because of his own traumas and dealings based out of what he felt through 9/11 and everything that was causing him a lot of, fear and unfortunate anger and hate that I think a lot of people were possessed with in that time. When something as tragic as that happens, trauma can really screw people up. I'm representative of a lot of the fear in Americans specifically in that time. And I think that that's a very important part of the story, obviously. People don't just go and act ill, I don't believe. They're acting ill out of their fear, out of their anger. And that needed to be well represented, I think, in this film, and it is. And I think that Neil is our proxy for that. He gets to show that. But important to show the other side, that redemptive side at the end, because truth in this, as is threaded throughout the whole movie, particularly with Stuart Couch, there's a really, there's a battle going on. Like, how do you, this guy's supposed to be this 9/11 ringleader that, was responsible or partly responsible for killing thousands of innocent people, but it's the law. And everyone should have a fair or the fairest possible trial that we can give them. It doesn't matter what we think of them, our predisposed notions of them. that's the importance of the purity of, if we can follow the law that purely. And I think that Stewart really honors that. And yeah, so Neil had to be a foil to that on some level. And then ultimately, I think, does respect what it is that Stewart is trying to do. When I read the script, it reminded me very much of the Mandela story of someone who was incarcerated for no reason, and then finding love and forgiveness for their captor. And not just love and forgiveness, but actual grace, understanding that those people are just acting out of their fears. I mean, this is all mental health. It's all mental and emotional health. It's the most important thing we can be talking about right now. And movies like this and stories like Mandela's hopefully are inspiring people to understand that more and more. But, you know, we're slowly but surely getting there, I think. Well, I think he clearly is a very talented man and has a tremendous passion to tell this story and tell it fairly and tell it right. On top of his, you know, visual and aesthetic talents, working with Kevin Macdonald is a real treat. I mean, the guy is an artist visually, aesthetically, but also very much wants to tell a fair and true story about these people and about this saga. And I also appreciate that he knows what he wants, and he asks for it clearly and kindly. And these are very important things when working with directors who are the captain of the ship. They are ultimately the ones barking out the orders, saying, you know, raise that sail and lift that anchor and all that jazz. It doesn't mean we don't need security forces or people that are, you know, actively trying to thwart the plans of people who wish to do ill to other people. All of those things are very important, but we must not dehumanize one another through these processes. We must not look at another person as if they are an animal, as if they are somehow not the product of the society that they came up in, which is exactly what they are. All of us are. And if we can see one another that way, then through this judicial process, we hopefully might be able to stop dehumanizing our prisoners, or even making them prisoners to begin with, depending on where along in that process they are. I think that we all need to be practicing more forgiveness and practicing empathy. And the great thing about empathy is that it's quite selfish too, because the more empathy you have, the less fear and anger you have, and the more freedom you get to enjoy. So empathy is a beautiful thing, and I want that to be in every film, always.
First of all, Kevin Macdonald, the director, with whom I've worked 12 years ago in The Eagle, and we befriended over the years. We wanted to work together again, and it was the perfect opportunity. And then the script, the material was amazing. The part was incredible, and I found what I am seeking usually as an actor is to be challenged. But above all, what drew me to this project when I knew that it was a true story is Mohamedou himself. I felt like I needed to do him justice in a way. And of course, I asked him questions about his relationship with his lawyers, with his guards, about what happened before he got taken from Mauritania, and after, about him, his life. And I felt like I needed just to listen to what he was saying and try to capture his spirit and the way he would talk, the way he would move, his sense of humor, his light, his generosity. I mean, when I discovered this hard story, I had a lot of questions and I wanted to know a lot of things, but this one specifically, how How is he able to turn anger into forgiveness, to be able to not hold a grudge against anybody? That was something that was very hard for me to really understand, to catch, because I don't know if I'd be able to do this. But still, before I had the script in my hands, I started to think about what it is to be angry against someone, and little by little, I was thinking, you're the one who's suffering. I mean, they keep going. You've been hurt, and they keep going, and you still think about it, and you get hurt. So I thought about it, but I never knew how to do it. And Mohamedou said something. He said, when you forgive people, it's a treat to yourself. Because it's a story that needs to be told, because he is exceptional, first of all, and his philosophy is a great philosophy to take and to live with. And I mean, just beyond Mohamedou, the film and everything, I mean, it's about human rights. Nobody should be tortured. We live in our countries because we know that there's a constitution and the law to protect us. So when you're not even protected by your constitution, well, where do you want to go? I mean, whether you're guilty or not, no one should be tortured. When we started to shoot, I had to learn, I mean, my lines and all of it, but I had to learn how to, I mean, different languages. I don't speak classic Arabic. I don't speak Mauritanian. So I needed to learn how to speak in those languages and to make it sound real. And plus, we had a little challenge, which was a hard one, is to gradually build his ability to become an English speaker, to become fluent in English. It was not easy, and physically, I needed to put myself in realistic conditions to go as close as possible to what Mohamedou has been through without hurting myself. To make it believable and to believe in what I was doing, so I could convey authentic feelings and emotions to my director, to the audience, and out of respect to Mohamedou. So yeah, I wanted to go beyond my limits and on and on to touch a kind of truth. That the movie is about human rights, that there's a universal message in it, is that no one should be tortured, whether he's guilty or not. We live in democracies to be protected, and there is a rule of law, a constitution that has to be respected. So yeah, if the audience could just start to question themselves, it would be great.
Well, I first became aware of this story when Mohamedou's book, Guantanamo Diaries, was published, I think, in 2016. And it was a bit of a cause célèbre because this was the first memoir, the first piece of literature that actually had been written in Guantanamo prison by somebody who was serving there. And of course, the whole way that it was brought out was in redacted form. It was published, and it was a sort of great coup by the publishing company, actually, to bring out the book with all the redactions, so all the black lines through it. And so, sometimes there were page upon page that was just blacked out. And of course, as a kind of physical object, it had this amazing power, and it spoke to the kind of the control and the censorship of the American state. And so even though Mohamedou's voice was being heard, it was still being censored, still being controlled. The man is so charming,
and so funny and so not what you expect from a internationally wanted accused terrorist criminal, who was accused of recruiting people for 9/11, financing terror, all these things. He's so the opposite of what you imagine. He's so in love with American culture. He can quote sort of, every line of The Big Lebowski he knows by heart, because he watched it 110 times while he was in prison, and he just come out with this stuff. And he's just incredibly good company, incredibly funny, and also just amazingly humane. And the idea we all talk about, of people forgiving, which we think is a very Christian thing, of forgiveness, after somebody has really harmed you or sinned against you, he embodies that. And I remember saying to him, how can you forgive what was done to you? How can you forgive the people who tortured you for years, mistreated you, falsely accused you? And he said, well, it's not easy. It's, every day I have to think about and make a conscious decision. I don't want to be someone who's swallowed up by hatred and the desire for vengeance. I want to move on. And so he's a man who, 14 years and falsely imprisoned by the American government, he hasn't asked for compensation. He hasn't sued the American government because he just wants to get on with his life. And that aspect of it really affected me. I thought, here's a really wonderful human being. And I thought, I want to make a film about that wonderful human being. We also did have access to both Mohamedou's defense lawyers, namely Terry Duncan, Nancy Hollander, and on the prosecution side, we had access to Stuart Couch, which is the role that Benedict Cumberbatch plays, and they were all incredibly helpful, and as was Mohamedou. And it's a very complex story that takes place over a very long period of time, and so that was really the challenge. How do we tell this incredibly complex story, which has geopolitics, which has legal terminology, which has kind of all these different countries involved? How do we tell that in a way that's simple enough for an audience to grasp, and also operates in a way that's good storytelling and kind of like a thriller? I wanted this to be an exciting story that you want to find out what happened. Effectively, you're on the edge of your seat, wanting to know what is going to happen next. And so when I started to think about this film and thinking about who is an actor with a North African origin, who is incredibly charming and likable, and who has an enormous range to be able to capture all the emotions that this role requires, there was only one answer. It was obvious right from the beginning. The casting director and I sort of looked at each other and said, well, it's got to be Tahar. So I think it's the role of a lifetime for him, and he shows such amazing range and such wit and intelligence and sensitivity. I'm bowled over by what he managed to do. Jodie is an actress who's known for doing, through her career, a lot of really entertaining kind of films, very Hollywood kinds of films. I don't think she's done anything that's really political or anything that's a kind of indie movie in this kind of way. And so I think it was very exciting for her to do something so different than what she's done before. And I think obviously most of her career these days she's being a director and being a producer. And it has to be something that really sort of appeals to her on some fundamental level, I think, for her to respond and to engage with it. But I took her the script and she said, "Oh, I really like this, but I need to be tougher. The character needs to be tougher." And she wanted to take out, her instinct was to take out all the sentiment, take out all of the kind of the Hollywood side of it in a way, I suppose, and make this character as much just about her job as possible. She's defined by her job. That's sort of all she is. And I think that was a brilliant instinct. And we made some alterations because of that. And you can feel just from the very first frames that you see Jodie, you know who this person is. You know the history. You don't need to be told any of that backstory, that background. You know who that person is, and it's the it's the genius of a great actor who's been doing it their whole life. Yes, I mean, you could think it can be set in a very brutal world, but actually what you take away from it is the decency of human beings, and the capability of people to forgive and to change their minds. And if ever there was a time that we need to learn to sort of see the humanity in the other side of arguments, it's right now, when everything is so partisan and divided. So Benedict, had to, in a way, take the, he's got, I think, the hardest role in this film, because he has to play a man who I think a lot of the audience will think is deeply unsympathetic to begin with. But right from the beginning, you feel like, okay, this guy he's part of the group, he's part of the military machine, but there's something about him which is more thoughtful, more kind of humorous, and he has a great sense of humor, the real Couch. And you have to. He gives him a humanity. It's not a caricature. He's a fully formed character in the way that Benedict envisages him. The only point in making something that has a political point of view is if you're going to reach a wide audience and maybe make them think a little bit in a way that they haven't before, make them go and look something up on Wikipedia that they haven't before. And so you need to, there needs to be a lot of sugar in with the medicine. And I think I saw the opportunity in this film to make something that is a thriller, and which hopefully, has that edge of the seat quality, but also a film which is about really wonderful characters who you fall in love with, and particularly Tahar. And I think one of the things that I'm so pleased with is in the film is that, even an audience who go in with an antipathy towards, Middle Eastern males accused of terrorism or on the fringe of terrorism, cannot help but fall in love with this character, with this man. And I think that can be disconcerting for people, but also it kind of actually, opens our eyes and says, well, we're all human beings, and I want people to be able to see a Guantanamo prisoner as a human being like you and I, with a family, with feelings, with a sense of humor, with the whole package.
Not in my wildest dream had I dreamed about writing a book, let alone having that book being adapted into a motion picture. And this is all because of the hard work of Nancy Hollander, my friend and my sister, Nancy Hollander, and the people who worked with her. There are many people who have been of great help to us, ACLU, and I just can't tell you. I don't want to start with names because that would make me leave some people I don't want to leave out. And I always laughed when I read the script that has been going through just the regular process of script writing, and I looked at Kevin and say, no matter how dramatic this is, the reality was more dramatic than this, because this is beyond anything you could imagine. I don't know. I know that some actors.
We both walked into that set, and both of us, even me, I'm sure Mohamedou more, just it made me gasp that it was so much like when I would walk through that to visit him.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect cast. I couldn't have hoped for a better cast. Even the personality, the soul, the beauty of those people in their soul is just beyond me.
Throughout the making of this film, once it really got started, I've worked with everyone. I worked with Leah, I worked with Kevin, I met with Kevin, I met with Jodie, and I really spent hours and hours on the phone with them talking about little details that they wanted to know about. I think the casting is beyond my wildest dreams of what the cast that we would have in this movie. And every one of the 3 that I've seen are just perfect. Just perfect. I mean, you know, people have said to me, well, Jodie Foster's younger than you. And I said, yes, but I was a good 15 years younger back then. So she's not very much younger than I was then. And Shailene is not much younger than Terry was. And, you know, Tahar isn't either. I mean, that was the time. It's not who we are now, it's who we were then. And they've really captured it, really captured it.
You just imagine that we were very beautiful then.
I've noticed that the way she uses her hands, the way she relates to Shailene, the way she relates to Mohamedou, it's so much like, and I even mentioned it while we were watching it, while the 3 of them are in the room together, and there are a lot of different things going on that first day that we saw. There's calm times, there's screaming times, there's funny times, and she really just makes me feel like she kind of got inside me, although Jodie warned me that this is not an impersonation. She brings what she brings to it, and I recognize that, but she's really captured, I think they've all captured that moment in time that happened and that the book was about.
Hi there, Debbie here. Did you know that the cat held by Marlon Brando in the famous opening scene of The Godfather was actually a stray that the director found on set and was not originally included in the plot? The cat was so pleased to be pampered that its purring muffled some of Brando's lines, and most of his dialogues had to be re-recorded and edited in. Make sure to click below to subscribe or on the side for more awesome content.